Hilchos Issurei Mizbeach Perek Shishi. The laws of things that are forbidden to be brought on the Mizbeach, chapter 6. We're done with the animals. Today we're moving on to what's called nisachim. Nisachim literally means poured things, but it's a specific reference to the flour, the wine, and the oil that would accompany every sacrifice. And every sacrifice was never brought on its own. It was always accompanied with wine, oil, and flour. And so today we're going to discuss which wines and oils and flours are permitted and forbidden for the Mizbeach. Says the Rambam halacha aleph, kishem shemitzvah liyos, kol karban, tamim v'nivchar. The same way there's a mitzvah that every single sacrifice itself, the animal, should be complete and choice. Both expressions that Rambam uses, again, complete meaning no mum, no defect, and choice meaning even if there's no defect, but it should be gishmak, it shouldn't be a thin animal, emaciated animal. So to the libations, and again, libations means poured, but we're going to translate it as including flour, wine, and oil. They have to also be complete, no defect, and they have to be choice. Shanemar, as it says, tmimim yiyu lachem v'niskehem. They need to be complete for you, they meaning the sacrifices, and their libations. Libations also have to be complete. That means that the nisachim should be complete. For example, that I'm right off the bat, you shouldn't bring nisachim loy miyayin mu'ushan, not from wine that's been exposed to smoke, so it's ruined. It's not an official smoking process. It just means that you had wine. In those days, the wine, it wasn't like we have today, these storage vats. It was in a pit. So if the wine is sitting in the pit and it's exposed to smoke, it becomes bad. So you can't bring such wine on the Mizbeach. V'lo seiles shehisliya. You shouldn't bring flour which became wormy. V'lo yivlal b'shemen shereicha yetay meira. You shouldn't mix the flour with oil whose smell or taste is bad. Halacha beis. It's not just the nesachim. V'chein atzei ha'ma'aracha. The wood that you use on the pile on the Mizbeach for the fire that burns the sacrifices, lo yiyu ala nivcharim, should only be choice wood. V'lo yeh bahem telas. There shouldn't be any worms in the wood. V'chol eitz shehisliya. Any wood that did become wormy, kishehu lach, if it was while it was still moist and fresh, pasal Mizbeach, it's disqualified for the Mizbeach. Hisliya yavesh, if it only became wormy once it got fully dried, goyder es hamakim shehisliya, you simply scrape off the place that got wormy. And we learned in earlier sets of laws that this was the job of the Kohanim who had a mum. Kohanim who couldn't serve, they would sit in the chamber of the wood and check the wood to make sure that it wasn't wormy. You never use wood that was involved in demolition. Take a bulldozer, someone knocks down a house. The wood from the knocked down house you don't use on the Mizbeach. Lo yaviu ela chadashim. You only bring new wood. Halacha gimel hamakdish yayin pasol. Oy soilas oy shemen pasol. Oy eitzim psulim. La Mizbeach. What if somebody consecrates? He declares holy wine or flour or oil or wood that are disqualified. So when it came to an animal that was disqualified because of a mum, that was literally a negative prohibition. You can get lashes for that. Here, harei hadavar safek, it's a doubt. Im doimim libal mum kebehema v'loike. Are these wines and flours and oils considered to have a defect like an animal, and therefore you'd get lashes? Or they're not like an animal that has a defect, and therefore the law is that you don't get biblical lashes, we give you rabbinic lashes. Halacha dalit, hasoilas, the flour, the hayayin, and the wine, the hashemen, and the oil, the halavina, and the frankincense that was used to accompany the showbread, lechem aponim, the ha'oifos, and the birds, the ha'etzim, and the wood, uklei shares, and the holy vessels. If any of these 7 things became disqualified or impure, you don't redeem them. So unlike, let's say, an animal that gets a mum. What do you do with an animal that gets a mum? It's not holy, you can't bring it for a sacrifice, but you have to redeem it. These things, you don't redeem them. Shanemar, how do we know this, that these things have a special law? Because it says, when it comes to the animal that has a mum, it says, vehemid veherich. You stand it up in front of the Kohen, and the Kohen appraises it. It's actually 2 verses, one after another. Which means, in order to be appraised by the Kohen to be redeemed, it has to be able to be stood up in front of a Kohen. These things are not, they're inanimate. Kol sheyeshne b'ha'amada nerach. Whatever could be stood up is appraised. Ve'elu einon bichlal ha'amada. These cannot be caused to stand. Lefichach ein nifdin la'ilam. Therefore, they can never be redeemed. What about the bird? Same idea. It's not like an animal that stands. It just can fly away. You can't kind of keep it in one place. Halacha hey b'med dvarim amurim. When are we talking about that you don't redeem them? If they became disqualified or impure after already becoming holy by being placed into a utensil. We're going to see in the next set of laws that whenever these things were used in a sacrifice procedure, there was two stages. First, you just made it holy. You brought it into the holy temple grounds. Then you would actually put it into the bowl that it was going to be used. That's next level holiness. So that's when, if they become disqualified, you don't redeem them. But before they become sanctified in a vessel, if at that point they became disqualified or impure, you do redeem them, or you can redeem them. But if they're pure, even though they haven't yet become fully holy, but they're still pure, then of course we don't redeem them because they have potential to be fully offered. With the exception of a flour offering brought by a sinner. There's an offering that's called Karban Oile V'Yored. It's the fluctuating offering based on what you can afford. If you're rich, you bring an animal. If you're poorer, you bring birds. If you're even poorer, you bring flour. Here, what happens if a person puts aside flour for his offering? Then he gets richer. It's like, you know what, now I can afford birds. I don't want to bring the flour. But the flour is still pure. Can he redeem them to get birds? This is the one exception where he can. Shanem Arba, because it says about this flour offering, Mei chatasai al chatasai. From his sin offering, for his sin offering. Which means, loimar, to say, Shemevi chatasai mid mei chatasai. He can bring a new level, a higher level sin offering from the money that he put aside, or from the flour that he put aside for his original sin offering. Lefichach, therefore, kaidem shetiskadesh b'kli sharis. This, his flour, before it becomes holy in a vessel, harehi kikdushas damim, it isn't essentially holy, it's only holy for its worth. You can redeem it even though it's pure. All the libations which became pure, here the Rambam says what you do with them. You made a pile on their own and you burnt them on the Mizbeach. You didn't bury them like other things. You burnt, the actual impure stuff you burn on the Mizbeach. Halacha vav. I couldn't find the picture for this. I was really looking hard, but I think we all know what this is talking about. You ever go into maybe in the bathtub as kids, or you do this just at home? You take a cup that's full of liquid. If you submerge it into a bowl, a larger bowl with liquid, so it displaces the water till the water reaches the rim, and then all the water rushes in. Right? In halacha, that concept is called hashaka. Hashaka, causing to kiss. Essentially, you cause the water inside the cup and the water outside of it to kiss. Where is this relevant? In the laws of purity. If somebody has water that became impure, so like when a person becomes impure, you go to the mikveh and you become pure. If clothing, today we don't know, this is not kept today, but in times of old, when you had clothing that became impure, you put it in the mikveh, it became pure. So if you have liquid, if you have water.
Why can't you do it today?
Huh? No, it's not relevant. Today we don't care about our clothing status. In those times you have to care about it. But the same thing is with liquid. If you have water that became impure and you need it to be pure, so what do? You take the water in a cup. In a cup, it's usually done in a stone cup because stone cannot become impure. And you submerge it into a bigger body of water, an actual kosher mikveh. And then when the mikveh waters just rush in a little bit and they touch the top of the impure water, the water becomes pure. The smaller the amount in the cup becomes pure from the larger amount. It's like putting water in a mikveh, essentially. So what would be an example of that? An example would be mei hachag, water that was put aside for sukkahs. Whenever you see the word chag, holiday, with no stipulation, it means sukkahs. On sukkahs, there was a special procedure called nisuch hamayim. It was the once a year they poured water on the Mizbeach. They would stay up all night, rejoice, go down to the spring, get the water, bring it to the Mizbeach. Now what happens if the water became impure? Shanitmu. They became tameh. V'hishikon v'tiharon. And you did what's called hashaka, causing to kiss. Again, you take the water, you submerge it in a bigger body of water. As soon as the top of the water rushes over, you're good. V'tiharon, thereby you purify them. K'meishi yisbar b'taros. As will be explained in the book that deals with impurity. So what do we do with this water? The water became first disqualified. Im tiharan ve'achar kach hikdishan, if you made them pure and only then you declare them holy ad elu misnaschen, they can be poured on the Mizbeach. Ve'im hikdishan ve'achar kach nitmu, but if they were first sanctified and only then became impure, and then you purified them, hoyel v'nidchu yidachu. Once they're pushed away, they're pushed away. You can't repair it. It was once tameh, disqualified for the Mizbeach. Halacha zayin zeisim va'anavim shenitmu, if you have olives or grapes that became impure, but you want to use them for wine and oil on the Mizbeach. Derchan paches mikebetza, you have to press them, as they used to do, much smaller quantities though. You press them less than an egg size at a time. And then whatever liquid exits is kosher for the Mizbeach. We had this principle before, and it's a concept in halacha, that the liquid that's deposited inside grapes or olives is not considered to be inherently part of the body of the olive or the grape. It's just deposited inside it. It's sitting inside it, but not attached. And therefore, while the grape may have become impure, but as long as you have less than an egg size, food cannot transmit impurity to other foods. So once you press the juice out of the grapes or the olives, they'll be touching less than an egg size of an impure grape or olive, and they can't become impure. So they're good. Halacha ches, ma'ila yesera asu chachamim b'kachim. The sages decreed an extra stringency when it comes to holy things. Shezrayim shenitmu, that if you have plants which became impure, afilu zra, and even if you replanted them, hayetzem mehen psulun l'nesachim, whatever comes out of those is disqualified for use on the Mizbeach libations. She'ein zriya ma'elas b'kachim. Replanting doesn't help when it comes to holy objects, sacrificial objects. Also wood and frankincense, even though they're not food, they can become impure, like food, when it comes to sacrifices. And because of this impurity, they become disqualified for the Mizbeach. You never bring them again. They cannot be used on the Mizbeach. Besides for impurity, there are some wines that are inherently not kosher for the Mizbeach. Hamasik, sweet wine. Can you believe it? Hashem only likes dry wine. Sweet wine, out. Bartanura, off the table. The Hama'ushan, smoked wine. Smoked wine means it was exposed to smoke. Others say it was stored in a barrel with a bad smell. The Hamavushal Be'esh, pasteurized wine. Almost all kosher wine today is Mevushal. It says on the bottom here, you see the sticker Mevushal. It's been cooked, it's been pasteurized. Pasteurized is not kosher for the Mizbeach. Oy Bashemesh, or it was cooked in the sun. Oy Shenishtan Tamay Babishal, or its taste changed through cooking. But wine which was simply heated up in the sun and didn't have the taste of pasteurization, and so too raisin wine. And wine right out of the pit. This is an ancient wine pit. You press the grapes over here, the wine would run down into the pit over here. If you take it right out of the pit and it didn't even wait 40 days, it hasn't finished fermenting yet, and wine that came from grapes that grew on a trellis. This is a trellis where you kind of lead the grapes over something. These grapes apparently were inferior, and wine produced from them was not ideal for the Mizbeach. A wine from a vineyard which is planted in an area that relies only on irrigation, or in an area which was full of manure. Or wine from a vine which has zera, which is plants planted next to it or around it. Or the wine from a vineyard which was never processed, never worked properly. All these wines, ideally you shouldn't bring it. If you did, it's kosher, but ideally you want to stay away from it. Wine which was left open overnight. It's disqualified for the Mizbeach. Even today, when you leave water overnight, it's customary not to drink it if it was left open. So it's called gilui. Because in ancient times there was a worry that snakes and bugs would get into it. Today, even though it's, well, sometimes you have some bugs, but with snakes we don't have it, but nevertheless, we stay away from it. So it's pasul legabe ha-mizbeach. Hidla gefen al gabe te'ena. If you led a grapevine over a fig tree, yena pasul l'nesachim, its wine is going to be disqualified, mipnei shenishtana reiche, because its smell will change. Harehu eimer, for it says in the verse, zevach u'nesachim, the sacrifices and the libations. Ma zevach shalei nishtana, af nesachim shalei nishtana. The same way the sacrifices don't undergo an inherent change, neither can the libations undergo an inherent change. Halacha Yud Aleph Seiles. Shehisli aruba, hisli urei vachitim shenases mehen. If the flour, whatever pile you were using, most of it became wormy, or most of the wheat which you were planning to use became wormy, psula, all the flour is disqualified from the Mizbeach. Hisli arei vchita achas. If the majority of one kernel of wheat became wormy, how is a suffix? It's a doubt. V'chol seiles shenishar bakemach psula. Also flour which has any coarse flour remaining in it is also disqualified, has to be super refined. Ketzad baitkim. How do you check this matter? Machnis hagizbar yadoi l'soich haseilas. Get the temple treasurer to put his hands into the flour. Im Allah ba'avak. If dust clings to it when it comes out, psula ad sheyachzer v'yinapel isa. That means it's too much coarse flour, it's disqualified. You must sift it. Aval seilas chitim shenizru bebeis hashlachim and bebeis hazvalim. But if you have flour that's produced from wheat which was planted in an irrigation field or in a field full of manure, or in a tree field or orchard, or in land which wasn't plowed properly or worked properly, like the wine, ideally you don't bring it, but if you did, it's kosher. Halacha Yud Gimel, chitim shaliktan miglale habakar uzram. Okay, this is a little bit viewer's discretion advised, but I made a picture just to show what it is. This is cow manure. And you can actually see kernels of wheat that they ate stuck in it. So if a farmer, a little desperate, he starts picking through the manure and he gets all these kernels of wheat and he replants them. Hare elu safek, it's a doubt. Im avra mi'usan bazriya ayadayin hin mi'usin. Does the disgusting element of them leave through replanting or not? Lefichach layavi mehen menaches v'imhevi kasha. Therefore, again, not ideal. Don't bring it in the first instance. But if you did, it's kosher. Halacha Yudalid ve'eluhein ashmanim apsulim. The following are the disqualified oils: shemen shel gargarim shenishru b'mayim. If it's oil that came from olives that were soaked in water, so they lose some of their potency. Oy shel zeisim kvushim, or you pickled olives. Oy shlukim, or you boiled olives. Oy shemen shel shmarim, or you got oil from olive dregs, like sediment. Oil smells bad. Kol elu psulim, these are all straight up disqualified. Aval shemen zayis, but again the same thing as the wine and the oil. If you have oil from olives, shenetoy bebeis hazvalim bebeis hashlachim, that was planted in a field full of manure or a field of irrigation, or there was other plants planted near there, or you have oil that you produced from unripe olives, they're still young. All these you don't bring initially, but if you did, it's kosher. Halacha tezvav, all the flour offerings, all the oil and wine offerings were kosher to be brought from both Israel and the diaspora, from new grain and from old grain. So long as you brought the choicest, that's all that counts. Is it best quality? You're good. Except for the omer offering on Pesach and the two breads on Shavuos, they have to come from new grain and from Israel. Other than that, you're free for all to bring from wherever you want, whenever you want, as long as it's the highest quality.